Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming. My name is Baldwin. You will have been expecting from the program Rosie Boycott. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it, and I am standing in. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself briefly, because you probably don't know me. Although I was on the Crash and Burn panel last year with Ruby Wax and Rosie, did anyone see that? Oh, my friend saw that. Loyal friend. So I am a journalist and a writer, and I'm also a recovering addict. I had an eating disorder. Was involved in other, what I call self-harming behaviours, around alcohol, a bit of drugs, men, and achievement and work, and generally doing everything to excess, to the extreme. And this panel is about crash and burn, and my crash came rather slowly. It took a while for me to realise that I was crashing, but I had a career that was, I wrote in my book that I ate my way to the top. I had this achievement of this career in journalism that I had binged and starved and exercised and binged and starved and exercised to cope with my low self-esteem and my fear and my insecurity and the sense that I was going to be found out doing something that I couldn't do. And also this career was sort of built a lot around ego, and I was sort of here thinking, who am I? And I was, after a period of grief, and after my father died, and after a relationship ended, and after I started realizing that I was eating and running and drinking and harming myself, I was signed off work, and with depression and anxiety and stress and so forth. And then I had to sort of start from scratch again and rebuild many aspects of my life, find peace around food, find peace around relationships with other people, relationships with myself, and find some sense of peace around work and achievement, and it's really about learning who I am and trusting who I am, finding some spirituality and so forth. So that's my story, and I'll just introduce the panel briefly, and they will then talk a bit more about their story. I'll ask a few questions to the panel, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions. So to my far left, we have Tanya Gold. She is a journalist, a freelance journalist for the Sunday Times and The Guardian, and a recovering alcoholic. To my left here, we have Margaret Aberdeen. She is a survivor of domestic violence, as well as cancer and meningitis. And she is the founder of an organisation to help women around domestic violence. And to my far right, we have Zoe Webber of Full Petal Jacket, which is a gardening social enterprise to support women. She has a long story of, she has experience of drug and rehab, as well as, I'll let you speak to the rest of the story. Lots of other issues. And Jessie Jones is the author of The Elegant Art of Falling Apart, and again, brilliant title. She has a long story of, involves cancer, involves paralysis, it involves relationship breakdown, drug and alcohol use, and homelessness, and a few other issues. So we have a stage full of issues, but I believe that, some people in the audience are here because, well, maybe everyone is here because we all struggle with issues, and I believe that being honest and open about them is incredibly powerful, and we can learn from each other and help each other. So I'm going to pass over to Zoe, if you'd just like to introduce yourself and speak a little about your issues.
Okay, hello everyone, hi. Apparently I'm going first, which is nerve-wracking. This panel today is, I've been a bit blind by it because I'm doing another panel tomorrow, doing the Giving Testimony panel, which is really heavy for me. It's the first time I've spoken out loud about that, so that in itself is a massive issue. This panel, however, is for me to talk about how I got myself to that point, I suppose. I was talking to my aunt a little while ago. She's a guiding light in my life. And she told me very sternly, she said, "Zoe, you're not recovering from cocaine addiction at all. You're recovering from a very shit family." And I was like, oh, okay. So that got me thinking that actually I needed to stop kind of beating myself up, because what I've always expected was that if I gave up the cocaine, or if I gave up going out with dodgy men, or if I gave up this, then things would automatically become better. And that really isn't the case, because I think once you become vulnerable, it's very, very difficult to claw yourself away from that horrible, label that we're given. So for me, recovery has been really, really complicated. I haven't taken cocaine for 4 years now. I had to stop taking cocaine because there's actually not enough cocaine for me to take anywhere. I have to... Bolivia doesn't have enough cocaine for me. So, and yeah, in the process of going into... I chose to go to a recovery program which is a community program. So it's a day program. Rather than hiding yourself away in the Priory or somewhere like that, you have to still engage in life, and you go from 9 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you sit in gender groups and group therapy, and you really work with yourself. And so I did that, but my experiences of that were very, very negative, which is what brought me to set up Full Petal Jacket. When I was in there, I was gardening anyway. I've been a gardener all my life. And when I was in there, we were sitting in this horrible little basement talking about really depressing things. And there was, out of this barred window, there was this beautiful garden. And I said to one of the project managers one day, I said, "Why are we not sitting in the garden and doing stuff out there to talk? It's really horrible in here. It's all damp and dingy, and it's making me feel really depressed, and I'm depressed already, So they were like, "Yeah, okay, well, next week we'll have to clear it," and a load of bureaucracy and form filling out, but next week we'll do a session in the garden. And actually we did a gender session. Ironically, that gender session was with the mother of the man that ended up attacking me, which is a very bizarre connection as I look back. But that gender session was amazing, and all 6 women that were in that group opened up like they'd never opened up before. So for me, that was kind of enough proof to start thinking that actually making women engage with gardening and growing flowers. Flowers are just pretty, they're just nice to see, aren't they? So if we can grow them and provide women with a safe space to work, as well as explore the options that will keep them safe in their life, then that's what I needed to do. So as far as crashing and burning is going for me, I'm always crashing and burning, and I think I will continue to crash and burn until the day I die. But actually crashing and burning for me has become a positive thing, because now I'm not scared of saying that my life is tumultuous. Is that a word even? It's like constantly up and down, danger, there, But actually the more you talk about it, the more opportunity you give other women to actually say, "You know what, I'm a little bit like that, and that's okay," And I hope with Full Petal that's what I continue to do, providing we can open our flower factories. Keep your fingers crossed for me, please. That's me done.
Thank you.
Me?
You? Yeah.
Okay, hi. I'm just going to take... The thing with these glasses is if I take them off, I can't see you, and if I put them on, you can't see me, so I'm going to choose to take them off. We were emailing each other before this talk, and I, introducing ourselves and our stories, and I sent this email to everyone, and it contained what I called my trauma CV, and it was just this huge list of shit that's, starting from age, about 3, I was kidnapped by my dad, and I went to 11 schools, and I ran away to London and lived in a squat, took drugs and drank and had terrible relationships, and when I was 25, I was completely paralyzed with an illness called Guillain-Barré syndrome, and I was recently reading a little potted biography I'd written to another writer friend of mine, and he said, "Oh, that's age 25, completely paralysed. And he said, oh, that's a very funny metaphor for a writer, but I think you're being a bit melodramatic. And I said, no, it's true. And it just, because it sounds, the thing is, it sounds so, I think, I've often tried to figure out how to find the balance between kind of living this story of being this really damaged person and also coming to accept myself and the circumstances of my life and the fact that actually this is just all part of my story and it's part of every human story. It's not, you know, it's not like a big melodrama. Anyway, so I've experienced drug and alcohol addiction. I've been into rehab. I'm in a 12-step program, and I'm in recovery now. And I'm very grateful for that. About 4 and a bit years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I went through all the treatments. I had surgery and radiotherapy and chemotherapy and everything. And then about a week after I'd finished all the therapies and the hair falling out and all of that, my boyfriend dumped me. And the extraordinary thing was that I was less able to cope with that than I was with cancer. You know, that was just, it devastated me completely and utterly. I ended up writing a book about that. I've forgotten what I was going to say. But I think one of the things that I'm really aware of is that writing is incredibly cathartic. It is for me anyway. Not just cathartic, but there's been a lot of research done into the healing power of writing, and I would encourage anyone that's going through anything to write about it. There have been masses of studies, starting with Dr. James Pennebaker in the 1960s, into what writing does for us, not just emotionally, but physiologically as well. It changes your immune system. It makes you healthier. So that's just a little tip. But I was talking to a friend of mine this morning who he fell down a lift shaft and broke his neck and is paralysed from the neck down. And I was saying to him, what am I going to say about, you know, all this traumatic stuff? And we ended up laughing because, you know, it just put it into perspective for me, talking to him. And not in perspective, I don't really believe in that thing of like, oh, find someone who's worse off than you are and then you'll feel better. But what it makes me feel is not that there are people worse off than me, but that we're all in the same boat. We've all got things, you know, we've all got, at different times in our lives, we go through hell. And we don't really have a choice about that, you know. Without that, life isn't rich at all, you know, from my point of view. But what I've come to understand along the way, you know, there's kind of understandings and then things I've learned, but is that, you know, if I'd never take a risk, I will never fail. You know, if I never fly, I'll never crash. Those are just really, you know, things that I've gleaned through all of this. But what I've learned, I think, is more than anything, is how to not do it on my own. And that's been the hardest thing for me to learn. And the book that I wrote, The Elegant Art of Falling Apart, it's really, you know, you could say it's a book about cancer, you could say it's a book about trauma, but it's not. It's a book about friends and how I learned to really let other people help me. And, you know, there's one lesson to be had from all of this. It's like, I would suggest I don't do it on my own. And why would I? You know, it's like I don't do my own plumbing. I don't fix my own car. Why would I try and get through a major life crisis on my own? And yet that is, you know, what we're taught to do. And it's, from my point of view, really not healthy. So that's been, you know, my experience to date. I keep hoping that next year I'm going to be here speaking on a panel called, you know, I fell in love and won the lottery and lived happily ever after. But my experience is this stuff keeps happening. I just get a little bit better at it each time. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I really hope to be chairing that panel next year. Over to you.
Well, I must say good afternoon to everyone. You know, for me, life is a journey, and it's the choices we make that counts. But I find it's very strange that, we have a sort of way where we talk about negative things like sadness and happiness. That's in the forefront of our mind. But I'm going to do something slightly different here today. I am going to talk about who I am at present and what I am doing. You see, I choose to be a positive, energetic, vibrant person. I choose to respect and love myself unconditionally. With compassion, kindness, understanding. When I have those things for myself, I'm able to share with others. I choose to remember the happiness in my childhood and my adulthood. I was born in the Caribbean. I remember the sunshine, I remember mountains and hills, all around me, the birds and the bees and the butterflies flying around. Now, in my adulthood, I choose to be happy. And it's so amazing, the choice that I personally feel that I need to do these things. And by doing so, I love communicating. And this is what I'm doing right now with you all. Sharing my life experiences. And this has helped me, form workshops, and I do coaching to empower others who have been through similar experiences in life, to rebuild their life and to live a very fruitful life. All these things stem from the life-threatening challenges that I encountered. I came from a domestic violence family, which most of us do encounter that. In my childhood, I saw all these bickering and fighting, so unhappy. In my early teens, I was living in New York City, and I ran away from home. I couldn't take it anymore. But you see, I had choices all around me. I could have turned to a life of crime. I could become a prostitute or go into drugs. In my mid-adulthood, I encountered a relationship where my former partner almost killed me, which induced the tragic death of my baby and the loss of my home. Do you know, I was hopeless. I was homeless. I was penniless. The thought of suicide drifted in my mind. Carrying all these baggages from my childhood and my adulthood, guess what happened to my body? It erupted like a volcano. I had cancer of the kidney, cancer of the brain, along with meningitis B and epilepsy. After going through some life-threatening challenges, you know what happened to me? I call this like a awakening call. Something hit me, wham, bang, Margaret, wake up! Wake up! Look at your body, look at your life, look at your lifestyle. There is something there you must change. Something that is tasting so bitter. Do you want to continue tasting that? And I said, no way, no way, no way. So what happened to me? I started sort of listening to myself, my inner voice, my thoughts, how I respond to certain things outside me, the people I connect with. And this brought so much joy to me when I realized there is something stronger within us, really strong within us, but we are the ones who have to tune in and listen. Sometimes go in silence if you need to. And these are the things you will find. So you know what I did? It was like a healing journey I went through, going to the core of what happened to me, why perhaps I'm creating all these, illnesses in my body and the abusive relationship that I am encountering. So I thought one day, no, this got to stop. Really got to stop. So what I have done, instead of choosing to be a victim or to continue, blaming others or stay in a mental depressant status, I choose to renew my mind, to transform all my opportunities, all my challenges rather, into opportunities. And do you know something, everyone? It has made me better, not bitter. This is what I feel. We all have it in us, but it's how we in tune with it. There's a poem I wrote while I was going through all these tremors. It's called Your Thoughts. Your thoughts are yours and yours alone. Your thoughts are like a magnetic force. You attract what you want, and you attract what, I'm getting quite confused. You attract certain things to your life when we having all these negative thoughts. And you are what you think. So I think if one is thinking all these negative thoughts, I suggest you switch it off now. Tune into a ray of positive thoughts for yourself and others. I'm sitting back here and I'm wondering what each of you are thinking right now. What each of you are thinking right now. Your thoughts are your destiny. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret. Over to you, Tanya.
Hello, my name's Tanya, and I'm an alcoholic, which is exactly what we say at the beginning of every AA meeting. And you know what? I can't think of what to say, because speech is not like writing. In writing, you can create drama and you have your narrative bumps, and I don't want to say anything, synthetic or prepared, so I can only tell you the truth as I see it, which is I think I was born with a mental illness called alcoholism, addiction, whatever, moral defect, according to the right-wing press. There are narcissistic elements to it, and so forth. I was born into a very ordinary, loving, suburban family in the 70s. And I was always very ambitious. The women in my family have always worked. So I didn't really think about, boys or marriage. I wanted to be Prime Minister, actually, when I was 7. And looking over the papers today, I'm not sure my 7-year-old self would have done such a terrible job. Anyway, so I worked very, very hard at school, and when I was 19, I was all set off to go to university. And then, in my first week at university, hindsight, don't you just love hindsight? and this is one of the things that I find so bewildering about the beauty myth, when you look at a magazine that goes, look, if you spend £50 million, you can look 12. I don't ever want to be 12 again. I want to get older and older, so I have, hopefully, wisdom, perspective, experience, because I found being a child and a young woman absolutely terrifying. So I appeared at this university, and then, like the Balrog in Lord of the Rings, flying his whip up to pull Gandalf into the abyss, I feel that alcoholism bit me on the arse, though that isn't what happens in the movie. And I think I'm very lucky to have developed alcoholism so young, because it's very mysterious. There have been very, very few studies. Mental health, as we all know, is not something that's widely discussed or looked after in Britain. I developed the chronic symptoms of alcoholism extremely young, in my 20s. I was a binge drinker from the word go, blackouts, vomiting, running around naked, blah, blah, blah. I think the most distressing thing externally was how amusing other people seemed to find it. And I only say that as comment on how other people look at alcoholics. I have to take responsibility for my behaviour. And I could argue whether it's relevant, whether they laughed at me or not, but they laughed at me. And the most terrifying thing from the inward perspective was I could not stop. I could not stop. I've been taught to say I would not stop, but at the time it felt I could not stop. And so, unlike some of the other stories we've heard on this platform, can you wave at me when I've been going on too long? Although I would say that I was born with this illness, I personally believe it's genetic and triggered by trauma, but we don't actually know. That's my feeling. This seemed to me to be an illness entirely of my own making, a slow suicide by my own hand. And You know, I think alcoholics have their own gods because it's a miracle, really, because I survived from age 19 to age 27 with alcoholic drinking, and I was the noisy, vicious, aggressive, unpleasant type of alcoholic. I wasn't the slow, death, quiet in the corner type of alcoholic. And in a way, I think that's great because I got to a stage when I was 27 and I looked in the mirror and I said, I hate you, and I wish you would die. And actually, I know that sounds terrible, but I realise again now that I was talking to the alcoholic. And so I was extremely lucky in that I had a mother who loved me and who had the money to send me to rehab. So I went to rehab, and it was the same as I'd always been, you know, grandiosity, denial. You know, I turned up with a copy of War and Peace. You know, I'm going to read War and Peace. I'm not like, you fucking losers. Which was confiscated. And I mean, I could talk a lot about my recovery, but there was just one thing that happened. So I picked fights with everybody. I tried to change the rules, you know, be Prime Minister of this rehab. And one day I picked a fight with everyone, and everyone went, "Oh, we hate you. You're so useless." In a sort of round table where everyone pretends to be incredibly reasonable. And so I went to see the nurses, and I said, "I'm going home. I'm leaving this crappy place. I have no money, but here's my silver rabbit from Asprey's. Will you lend me £50 if I pass this to you?" And they said, "Hang on, we're going to call a counsellor." And we called a counsellor because it was out of hours. And he said to me, he talked me down, and then I said, "I want to go home. I still want to go home." And he said, "You can't go home." And I said, "I want to go home." He said, "I'm coming in." And this man drove 20 or 30 miles through the Wiltshire, Dorset countryside on a Tuesday evening, and he sat down, he held my hand for 5 hours, and he said to me, "You're lovely." And I kept saying, "I'm not lovely, I've done this. He kept saying, "You're lovely, you're lovely, you're lovely, you're lovely." No one had ever told me I was lovely, or for a long time. And so the next day, I sat there and I thought, okay, everyone my whole life has told me that I'm super intelligent and I think I should be Prime Minister. Well, if you're so super intelligent, why are you living in what is essentially a psychiatric hospital? And your mother won't have you home. In fact, no one will have you home. So I wrote a list of everything that I thought I should do, and I think it's like the first time my adult self actually emerged in me from the age of 12 when I managed to sort of completely shut her down. And I wrote a list of the things that I would do. And on the top of the list were no alcohol, no drugs, because with alcohol and drugs, you don't stand a bloody chance. So, for some amazing reason, I've stuck to it. And I think the main reason, because I now have to wind up now, that I've stuck to it is I'm not one for holding back. My husband says that it will not say "mustn't grumble" on my gravestone. I talk about everything, I write about everything, I keep nothing in, and I know it can be narcissistic, but it stops me reaching for the bottle, which I know is just death. That's me.
Okay, thank you so much to the panel, and there were so many themes there that came up, and I think we have a lot in common. We also have a lot of differences. Really like to hear about the writing, because I also write everything that I feel, and I find that really cathartic. And something that came to mind was this sense of going from self-harm to self-love, which has been my journey, and I think which a lot of addicts have to go through that journey, and people who suffer domestic violence as well have to go through that journey from self-harming to self-love, and not doing it on your own. And I think some of us have the personality where we're born into families and there is no support, and we just think, right, I'm going to do it on our own. And it's in the 12-step fellowships, they talk about weakness. It's the weakness that unites us and that brings us through, and not the strength. And I loved your intervention, and I just wanted to, so I'm going to pick up on that, because from my experience, when you've had sort of many years of living one way, you sort of picked up these habits and behaviours in your childhood, and you lived with them, and you use them as survival tools for like 10, 20, 30 years or whatever. And then you try and change. And I'd like to ask, how do we change the harmful patterns that we have built up through so many years? And I loved what you said about, we choose our thoughts, and I try to practice that, but, I fall back, and I've been doing it this way for like so many years, and just doing it that way all of a sudden I find really difficult. So I'd like to sort of ask that question of the panel: how do we change the harmful patterns that we've got ourselves in? Is there a book? Is there a pill? Is there something we could take? I've looked for it everywhere and haven't found it, so let me know. But what is, I'll come over to you, Zoe, if we can just keep it to a couple of minutes.
Yeah, no worries. I think that if I look back over that, what I call recovery, I remember someone saying to me in the day programme, actually, all that time ago, you've got to stay away from everything that is damaging to you. And it's taken me 4 years and a clean life as well, because when you're taking drugs and drinking, and you don't know your ass from your elbow. So that clean life really has magnified to me what are the harmful things in my life. And unfortunately, I think it's that thing of, if you want to change one tiny little thing that is that destructive in your life, you have to change absolutely everything. And for me, that's been about distancing myself from people that I absolutely love, because for me now they're harmful. So sorry, but you've got to go, which is a horrible, horrible experience to go through, and equally as damaging as probably the next line of cocaine. But those are the things that you have to, it's chipping away. It really is, because if I look at all the things that have harmed me through my recovery, they're actually the things that drove me to want to take that much cocaine, and that slow suicide that Tanya was talking about, actually just thinking, this is my way out, And that's what cocaine was for me, it always used to be just once more, and just keep going, and this one will be the one that does it. And it never did. It really never did. And so, yeah, I think it's that. I think you have to absolutely change the whole rhythm of your life, and I hate to go back to what I said earlier, but the gardening for me is just, and growing and likening myself to, a potted herb, if you like, has been really, really, really helpful for me. And I wish to God that I had just stuck to that, because I know that it works, whereas I didn't. I've kind of scattered myself, and, I still have gone out with dangerous men, or I still have done this, or still tried to have a relationship with my mother. And now after, nearly 5 years on, I've accepted I can't do those things. I can't have a relationship with her. And that actually, now I've accepted that, has made my recovery so much easier. I'm so much happier now. And everything else in my life, my friends seem to be padding out quite happily too. So I think if I had to give anybody that was going into recovery that advice, it would be just block everything out and just concentrate solely on you and the things that make you utterly happy, because that's all that's going to work, really, isn't it? It's,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add in terms of changing the patterns?
Yeah, well, it's just such a huge question. I think, for me, the first thing about changing my own patterns is recognizing them. And of course, the real difficulty that I have is that I can't see the self-destructive patterns that I have, and so I continue. I keep doing them, and so that that brings me back to this thing of not doing it on my own, because one of the most important things in my life is allowing people into positions where I give them permission to tell me that stuff that I don't want to hear, and that in my case is generally friends, but it can be a therapist or a priest or whatever, but it's that thing of letting someone tell me what I don't want to hear, because that's, I can't, it's unknown to me what I'm doing to myself. Beyond that, I'm slightly, my experience of change has been incredibly incremental, and yet almost, we talk about a day at a time, and I sort of break that down to almost a minute at a time. So I'm very fond of a Buddhist parable, which is like, just as a mountain is made of, a gazillion grains of dust, so my life is made of moments, seconds. And it's what I choose to do. I have a little bit of an issue, I'm sorry to say, Margaret, with the positive thinking approach, just because I've witnessed it being used as a bit of a stick to beat people with, like, you got cancer because you're not positive enough, and if you were just a bit more positive, you'd get better, and all of that. I really can't, I don't go along with that idea. But what I've found is that when I change my actions in each moment, that informs my thinking, which informs my feeling, my reaction, and creates better action. So it's like a virtuous spiral. And so if I can just be the best I can be in this moment, that's all I need to do, which is incredibly simple, and it just breaks that whole mountain down to a grain of dust.
Great. Thank you. I share, I love the sort of, in this moment, be the best you can be. If we could just have 2 minutes each.
Yes, certainly. Well, just as what Mr. Jesse, what you just said there. You see, it's our choices. For me, when I encountered cancer and all this sort of thing, I just think it's the choices. And my habitual thought pattern, I decided I have to change. So that is the way I started going more within myself, living in this very moment. And again, too, is how people come to you. I guess how we expect is our attitude to how we transform certain things. So if someone coming in a sort of way, it's how I react to that. That's another way of saying, well, that's their role, this is my role. So that's the way, it's a long journey. Not like a switch of the light, this has happened to me, but, so I'm looking at things, in a sort of way, well, that's the way it is, but it's how I look at certain things. So that is how I've been going about. And this is the way for change. It's a slow process, but it's a lovely process. For me it is, So this is where I am. And it's all, I think, with the mindset also. And how, people, again, the choices you make to your friend. I had to disinherit myself from my family environment to be who I am today. Because I took on all that emotion and pain. And this is why my body went kaput. So I think it has a lot to do with ourselves. Love ourselves. It's not selfish, it's not egotistical. It's self-care, self-interest, that's how I would call it. You be the change for what you want others to see. And that is how I've been going with my life. So thank you very much. I'll pass it on to you.
I think perhaps the most helpful thing I've ever realised since I stopped drinking was I am not responsible for other people. And it just came to me one day when somebody was doing something that annoyed me on the bus. I shout at buses a lot. And in fact, I've got to stop doing it because I've got a baby now. And my husband says that babies pick up parental speech patterns. So people who grow up in sort of harmony households go, my baby goes, And so I was getting sort of ready to tell this person their life and everything that they were doing wrong. And I was getting really stressed about it. And then suddenly I thought, you know what? This has got nothing to do with me. I can just go and stand in that patch of sunlight over there and think about my favourite novelist. And that was the most incredible realisation, that I was only responsible for my tiny little patch of earth, and the rest of the world can do what the hell they want.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that in sort of in the addiction field, they often talk about addiction being a hole in the soul, and that was kind of my experience. There was sort of this very early wound, and I tried to put into that hole everything I possibly could. So for me, it started with food, and then a bit of drink, and then, well, a lot of drink, and then men, and then career and achievement, and look at me, and and praise from the outside, and all this stuff I was putting in, and as you were saying, like with another line, it'll fix it, and the hole was so deep, it was just a bottomless pit, and then rebuilding that from the inside out. And I love the idea of gardening, and if I could sit still long enough to God, I would love to sort of get more involved in God, because slowly and gently nurturing that hole in the soul from the inside out, slowly, when you've got a pattern of self-harm, turning that into a pattern of self-love, I think it takes time.